Hello, this is Hooked by Happenstance. I'm Kendra, and it is time for Yarn Tales. Today we are not adding a new chapter. Instead, it is time for the reveal of Shawl number 2 and to discuss my stats for my reading in March. For those of you that are new, Yarn Tales is my ongoing series here at Hooked by Happenstance where I read books, I tell you a bit about them, and then I apply silly Kendra rules to make various segments of my reading shawl. I'm using a variety of yarns that kind of correlate with different kinds of books that I'm reading. So there is a yarn for books I read with my kids, a yarn for books that I read from my Life's library subscription service, which I get every 6 weeks, a yarn for physical books that I read by myself, and a yarn for audiobooks that I read by myself. And then I also have been adding beads to the segments if I'm reading the book for a readathon. So that has given me an interesting way to put together a tangible reading log of the things that I have been reading. Sometimes I have problems when I'm reading with giving it enough time and value because there's no tangible product at the end, and most of my hobbies involve a tangible thing. I like product when I'm done, and this has been a way for me to value the reading which I am enjoying in a physical form. So, I had originally at the beginning of the year planned to make one shawl. I figured I'd read 12 or 15 books this year because in the last decade or so, while I've spent a lot of time reading to my children, I have not been prioritizing reading for myself, just because there didn't seem to be time or energy, or that just wasn't where I was putting those things. But I decided that this year I wanted to change that because throughout my life, I have been a very big reader. I've read a lot of books. I spent a lot of my time reading. It was like one of my major passions for many years of my life. And for some reason, it kind of like fell off the deep end, especially as I started to do things like crocheting, which took up my hands, and I'm not one of those people that can read a physical book while I crochet. It just doesn't work for me. But I have jumped very deeply into audiobooks this year because I realized I could get them for free through the library services provided by my local and state library, which has been a game changer for me because I was not able to afford audiobooks if I was going to need to purchase them myself. But if I could borrow them, that was definitely a thing that I could do. And borrowing through e-libraries where I didn't even have to go to the library to get the books has also been a game changer because I live about 30 minutes from my local library. So it was like a trip if I was gonna go, and I can only, it's hard to plan, right? But I can just pick off my phone in the middle of the night at 4 in the morning when I'm still awake. I can decide it's time to start a new book, and I can do that using the apps on my phone, which I have really, really enjoyed and has improved the quantity and also the quality of my reading because I've had access to a more varied kind of book. Especially when it comes to adult fiction, my local library carries a very specific flavor of books, and they are not the flavor I enjoy. They are mostly by authors who are prolific, the authors that put out like more than a book a year and have ghostwriters and things. Those people, and the authors that are very formulaic, there's a lot of those. There's a lot of mystery, a lot of thriller, not things I enjoy. And there's a lot of romance of a flavor that is not mine. So, I just have not liked very much of what I have found in the adult fiction section in my physical library. Their YA section is pretty good, but I still have access to more things online. And I've also found that ebooks are easier for me to read. I have some issues sometimes with tracking lines in books and the shortened line, and actually I think it's the fact I can change the font to a different font on a black background has improved my reading experience because I'm just able to do it faster and more efficiently, and I'm able to absorb what I'm reading because I'm not constantly thinking about like staying on the right line. I don't know. That's a lot of information about how and why I read, but that is what this is all about. The reason I started doing these Yarn Tales videos was because I wanted to read more and I thought this would be a fun experience. Well, it was and is very fun, and it has led to more than one shawl. What I thought was going to be 12 or 15 books total has turned into many more for the year, and it actually grew from one shawl, which had been made out of yarn I'd been gifted that I had put together, to a second shawl, the one that I'm wearing, that I purchased the yarn for myself because I knew I wanted to continue this project. Now, interesting things to note about the shawl that I'm wearing. I said before that I am using 4 different types of yarn. Only 3 of them made it into this shawl because I did not read any Life's Library books. I didn't complete any of them during March. I read the second book that came with Life's Library. I did not enjoy. I didn't even consider it a DNF because I've only made it 15 pages in, and I cannot stand the way that the author writes. It reminds me of the way that I wrote in like high school. It's got lots of flowery and beautiful prose. They're all linked together, and I think you're supposed to like feel something or buy into it just because it sounds pretty, but it just sounds, I don't know. It reminds me too much of writing of mine that I don't enjoy. So I can't do that book. And the next book turned out to be a book that I am still in process on because it was a nonfiction book of stories from Syrian refugees, which I have to be in the right place to read because otherwise it's a lot. It's a very intense book and it's real stories, and I have to be careful about what times of day I read it. Like, I can't read it before bed. So I have been spacing that out, which means that I didn't finish any Life's Library books in the month of March. And that means I did not use the Land Fear yarn from Cattails that I had bought for the shawl. It's in the bag with all the leftovers from the shawl yarns. It will go on to either be another shawl in the future, or I have kind of a project that I plan to ultimately do with all the leftovers. So we'll see what happens with that. But there are only 3 yarns in this shawl. Those yarns are, let's see if we can do this here. The light one here is books that I read with my kids, and that is some Cattails yarn in the Lady Celine colorway. Then we have this, which is the audiobook yarn, which is the majority of this. I actually got 2 skeins of that yarn as opposed to 1 of each of the other ones. And this is from Lolo Did It. It is the one-of-a-kind color called Blarney Castle. And then here, you can see there is another Cattails yarn. This is for books that I read in physical form or ebook, and that is the Black Aja colorway. So that is everything. This is a fingering weight shawl. I have made up my own pattern. I have been asked by people whether I'm going to make tutorials or publish the pattern or whatever. I will probably never make a tutorial on it, no. But I'm also not making a pattern at this point. At this point, this shawl is just for me and the way that it's put together because of the 5-star rating system I've been assigning to books and the patterning that I'm choosing. The math is not pretty to release as a pattern. I've been fudging things along the way. Use what I'm calling creative license, which means I make it up as I go along and I make it all work. But that does not make for a pretty pattern that somebody else could follow. Now, when I am done with the entire Yarn Tales series, I will probably make a shawl pattern for available probably through Peachless Pattern Pile on Patreon. That will be based on the concepts and the things that I most enjoyed out of this shawl, but it will have math that is more appealing to somebody trying to follow a pattern. So that is where this stands. For right now, it's just for me, and that's actually really nice to have a project that's just for me. Like, I don't feel like this has to be something polished and pretty for all of you. It just has to work for me, and it is amazing, and I love wearing it already, even though it has already been cat and dog furred, because that's my life. And since I have washed and blocked this, I've been wearing this tons. At the end, I'll put photos that I took outside of the shawl the day that I finished blocking it and everything, but it's been several days since then, and the shawl has been worn almost every one of them. So that is a good sign. Now, let's discuss my reading stats, because stats are fun. Okay, so this shawl is every book that I read in March. I read 17 books total in the month of March. That broke down to be 14 audiobooks and 3 physical or ebooks, because I consider them the same thing. Out of that 17 books, 5 of them were books that I consumed with my kids. And 1 book I decided to DNF, which means I did not finish it. And so its pages and time and whatever does not count any further than this. It counts in the number of books, but it does not count any further. And that means that I consumed 11 books by myself in the month of March. So overall, a number of them, obviously, like I said, 14 of these books were audiobooks. And I don't have all of the times for reasons, but I did go through and write down the page equivalents, like how many pages are in the books, because I consider an audiobook to be just as valid as a paper book. It is like somebody reading a book to you aloud, and I read books to my children aloud all the time and consider those very valuable. That is why I place the same value on audiobooks and consider it to be worth the same number of pages. So, in the month of March, of my 17 books, I read the page equivalent of 4,597 pages. Then I went through and averaged my star ratings. I give everything a rating from a DNF, which is 0, to 5 stars. And of my 17 books, I had an average rating of 3.7, which I think is a pretty good month, if you ask me. Then we are going to look at the overarching things for the entire year. At this point, I have read 29 total books. And I am at a page equivalent of 7,992 pages and an average rating of 3.6 stars. So 2019 is turning out to be a pretty good reading year for me, and I'm getting beautiful shawls out of it, which has been so much fun for me. I have been really enjoying the books. I have been enjoying working on the shawl while I'm listening to books. I'm just really, I don't know, this project is, like I keep saying, it's my happy place right now, and I'm gonna stay in my happy place as long as I can, and it keeps making me happy. So, let me turn around and give you a little view of the shawl on me. I know it's gonna be hard to see because, you know, camera and, yeah. So, this is what it looks like. And you can see the beads and things. Here, I shall now bring it across the screen for you to see. And you can see that this segment, like in here, is where I did the readathon for Buzzwordathon. In March, I chose to just do one readathon, but I'm so happy with how this turned out. Now I will include here some footage and some pictures and things that I took of the shawl after it was blocked outside so you can see it in completely natural light. If you want to continue to see the chapters of Yarn Tales, go ahead and subscribe down below because I do not post on a regulated schedule, so that's the best way for them to just pop into your feed. And if you've missed out on any of the chapters, there is a playlist here on the channel that is all the information you need. And as I was mentioning my patterns, if you're interested in seeing the patterns I've already published, they are available on my Patreon page at the Peachlets Pattern Pile tier. There will be more forthcoming. I'm just working through the catalog as I kind of can and getting things up. I will see you all next time. Enjoy the pictures of the pretty shawl. Bye.